what's up everybody, it's your boy Proftrof. Y'all wanted me to react to extra credits, and we are here with Rome, the Punic Wars, first Punic War extra history. This is the first video in the playlist, so I figure if we're gonna enjoy this, starting from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we're still at the bottom, but we might get the top at some point, so let's get to
Hey
the
everybody,
shit.
welcome to Extra History. I'm Dan, that's James, and this is Allison.
Adam, James?
James, and this is Allison. We usually make videos talking about games, but today we are here to talk about Rome. A few months ago, we got a call from the folks at Creative Assembly, probably one of the coolest we ever received. And they told us, hey, so we're finishing up our next Total War game, and...
When is this video from? Oh, wow, that explains it. That explains... Oh, why did I fucking do that? Go back, bro.
we've got some money left over in the marketing budget from our publisher. The way we see it, we could buy a few more banner ads, or we could underwrite you guys making some videos to teach people about Roman history. You don't have to mention us or the game, just teach some history. And we said, that's awesome. And we are going to mention them and their game because I would love to see more companies do this. I want to see companies use their ad budget to not only
You want to see more companies give you money? Yeah.
garner sales, but also do some
my
good.
guy.
So to everybody else marketing a game that has something worth discussing,
Give me
there are
money.
dozens of content creators out there who can do a lot more for you than a few banner ads are going to. So good on the folks
True.
at Creative Assembly for setting an example. We approve. But let's get started, huh? We are going to be talking about the Punic Wars, because they're less well known than the campaigns of Caesar or the civil wars of Augustus. We're going to probably spend most of our time focusing on the Second Punic War because it is just freaking awesome.
Which were the Punic Wars? Were those the Hannibal ones?
It's got everything you want out of a great fantasy novel. Blood oaths of revenge, bloody battles, brilliant generals, political intrigue, unbelievable feats of heroism, a clash of two mighty dynastic
Yeah, I think
clans.
it's the
Heck,
one
it's even
sort of
got fighting
Scottish.
monsters, which I'm going to get to in the next episode. So what were the Punic Wars? Well, they were the wars between Rome and Carthage for control of what was, to them, the whole world. I can't even begin to tell you how much rested on these conflicts. This was 3rd century BC's World War II. Rome and Carthage were the two big powers in the Mediterranean, and only one of them was going to be walking out of this one alive. We're still seeing the impact of this war even
Jeez.
today, thousands of years later. Without the Punic Wars turning out the way they did, I bet you the United States Senate wouldn't be called a Senate, and our money wouldn't say E pluribus unum on the back. Without the Punic Wars, I bet you Latin would not be the foundation for most of the Western European languages, and Roman laws wouldn't be serving as the basis for law systems around the world. These wars would make Rome the dominant power in the West for the next 700 years, and shape the course of history as a result. Now, some of you may still be scratching your heads at the name Punic War. Where did that come from? After all, Punic doesn't really sound anything like Rome or Carthage. Well, see, the people who originally settled Carthage were Phoenician, which is how the Romans usually referred to them. Only their pronunciation of the word sounded more like Punician, which then, used as an adjective, became Punic or Punic. You know, it doesn't matter. The point is, ancient Roman writers called these the Punic Wars, which basically to them meant war with Carthage. And we have just stuck with the word they used. Cool fact, though, the word Punic still means treacherous in English. I bet you that wouldn't be true if Carthage had won these wars. But okay, the Punic Wars were wars between the two most important powers in Europe for dominance of the whole kit and caboodle. So let's introduce our protagonists.
Jeez.
In
Look
one
at Carthage during that time. They were fucking huge, bro. Jesus Christ. And Rome was only stuck to Italy and Sicily and little islands. They're not that little, but yeah. Jesus, look at that. I mean, most of this land is shit land, you know, but still.
kit and caboodle. So let's introduce our protagonists. In one corner, we have Rome, recent conquerors of Italy. Well, okay, most of Italy. The Gauls still held the northern bit where Milan stands today. Rome was a republican oligarchy, meaning they were a democracy, but most of the decision-making still fell to the rich. Romans held military glory in the highest regard, and made military service an essential part of political advancement. In the other corner, we have Carthage, based in the city of Carthage on what is now the northern coast of Tunisia. They were also a republican oligarchy, but more focused on trade. Wealth was the prime determiner in political mobility there, and they would use mercenaries to fight their wars instead of citizen soldiers. At the time our story begins, Carthage controlled most of northern Africa, a little bit of Spain, and several of the major islands in the Mediterranean. And it's that handful of islands that got everybody into trouble. You see, the First Punic War broke out over the island of Sicily. The actual causes are almost comical. It started when a group of Italian mercenaries, calling themselves the Mamertines, were invited into a city and basically got bored and decided to capture it. They then became pirates and raiders, and then, when somebody finally tried to stop them, they appealed to the Carthaginians, whose city they had technically just stolen, to come and help them out. And Carthage did so, but the story doesn't end there. After the Carthaginians bailed them out, the Mamertines decided they weren't so happy having to obey the Carthaginian rules now, and so they appealed to Rome on the pretext that, hey, come on, we're Italians, asking the Romans to help them free their city from the Carthaginians who had just helped them. This, of course, turned into the First Punic War, a grinding conflict that took 20 years, cost almost a fifth of the male population of Rome, and had over 1 million soldiers involved in the fighting. Just take that in for a second. 1 million soldiers. Do you know how long after the fall of Rome it would be for a European war to include 1 million men? The 16th century. And here they were doing it in the 3rd century BCE. And all because of some idiots getting bored in Sicily. I'm just gonna skim over the events of the First Punic War, but for our purposes, the First Punic War was a back and forth with, in the loosest of terms...
Hannibal was in the second one, I think, right? By the way, if you guys have not seen the Hannibal movie they made back in the day, I remember watching that movie as a young adult, young teenager. That shit was one of the best fucking historical movies I've seen. I still remember the scene with the fucking snowy mountain shit. That shit was so good.
The Carthaginians slowly losing on land, while the Romans managed to bungle a series of naval engagements, and in general just make a mess of things at sea. This was, after all, Rome's first experiment with doing anything outside of Italy, and the first time they'd ever built a navy. In fact, one story goes, they didn't even know how to build warships, and so they had to copy a Carthaginian ship that washed ashore. Anyway, once the Romans finally managed to get the whole navy thing down and started winning at sea, Carthage capitulated. I highly recommend you dig further into that war sometime, because I am really glossing it over. But that should serve to catch you up on the backstory to our main event, the Second Punic War. And the key to our tale, the piece that ties the First and Second Punic War together, is a man named Hamilcar Barca, a general for the Carthaginians on the island of Sicily during the First Punic War. See, the thing here is, he didn't actually lose that war. After the naval defeat that caused Carthage to throw in the towel, his army was still intact. So he returned to Carthage with his troops expecting to get paid, because they're mercenaries, because that's how Carthage fights wars. Unfortunately, Carthage, what with the cost of the war, the reparations imposed on them by the Romans, and the interruptions in trade and such, were in no position to be paying anybody.
Oh dear.
They basically came out and said, sorry guys, we have not got any money. Could you all just kindly return to where you came from? You can probably guess how well that went over. Short version, those troops were soon besieging Carthage. In a panic, Carthage called upon, who else, but Hamilcar, and made him ride out and defeat his own army. So he hired some more mercenaries, promising to pay them up front this time, and over the next 2 years, he did just that. But Hamilcar held in his heart a secret resentment and a burning hatred. A hatred for the Romans who'd humiliated him in the city he once idealized, and a resentment against the old men of Carthage who he'd felt stabbed him in the back, never giving him the troops or the resources he needed to win a war that, by all rights, he should have won. He began to distance himself from what he considered the weak city fathers in Carthage, more concerned with their coin and their trade routes than fame and everlasting glory. So when they later turned to him to ask how to repay the crushing war debt they owed to Rome, he put forth an idea he'd been toying with in the back of his mind. He proposed raising a new army to secure their African holdings. To this, the old men readily agreed. But once Hamilcar had his army trained and ready, he immediately crossed to Europe to re-establish the Carthaginian Empire in Spain, stopping only to make one last offering to the gods before he crossed, an offering upon which he made his young son Hannibal swear an oath of vengeance, never be a friend to Rome. And with that, he made straight for the silver mines in the south of Spain. By the time the Carthaginians found out about it, silver had already started flowing back to Carthage, so no one questioned his usurpation of the army, or the complete lack of oversight of his activities in Spain. So Hamilcar then began to push east, carving out an unofficial kingdom in Spain for himself and his family. But opposition to his advance was fierce, and it took him 4 years of constant war to push all the way to the eastern coast of Spain. Over these 4 years, his raw army from North Africa became one of the most formidable fighting forces in the world. Over time, these men went from being mercenaries to being an army loyal to the Barcid family. Many of these same men would follow Hannibal over the Alps years later, another story we're going to be talking about later. When Hamilcar's forces reached the eastern coast of Spain, Rome started to get a little bit worried. After all, here was not only a Carthaginian, but the very general who had fought them in Sicily, with a very large army, only a short hop across the water from Rome itself. So they sent a delegation to ask Hamilcar what he thought he was doing with an army that close to Rome. Hamilcar simply replied, "I am gathering the booty we need to pay you the reparations we owe from the last war." They couldn't really argue with that, so they packed up and went home. You gotta love a guy with the wit and stones to say something like that. I am just invading this territory so we can pay you. How awesome is that? From there, Hamilcar continued his conquest, heading north and eventually founding a city we know well today. Some of you may have already guessed it from his last name, but he named the city Barcino after his family, a place that we now know as Barcelona. Yet again, we see the echoes of the Punic Wars in our current world today. Shortly thereafter, Hamilcar died. The details of his death are extremely unclear, and there are many stories about how he died, but the one I prefer to believe is that he died leading his enemies away from his young sons Hannibal and Hasdrubal so that they could make their escape. For the next 7 years, the Spanish territory was expanded by Hamilcar's son-in-law, who was also named Hasdrubal, just to make things confusing. Hasdrubal, the son-in-law, ruled well and fairly by all accounts, until his assassination in 221 BC. But for the purposes of our story, the most important thing he did was make a treaty with the Romans at one point, agreeing upon the borders of the Carthaginian territories in Spain. A treaty that will serve as the cause for the Second Punic War. Join us next time when the Second Punic War really fires up, and we dive into the drama of the crossing of the Alps and watch the clash of famous champions like Hannibal, Scipio, and Fabian. See you then.
Scipio! That dude was a monster. But, I mean, so was Hannibal, so... Anyway, that was Rome, the Punic Wars, the first Punic War by Extra Credit. Let me know what y'all think about this video. I enjoyed it immensely, and I'm planning to resume with this series later on. Let me know if you want to see more of this. Like, comment, subscribe, and see you next time. Everybody have a nice fucking day.